What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about 101 facts about Canada. So, truth be told, us Americans, we're really not taught much about Canada growing up. So, YouTube is really my unofficial Canadian education with videos exactly like this. So, today I'm very curious to see what we're going to learn about Canada. This is 101 facts, I imagine, filled with a whole bunch of random Canadian information that I didn't know, which sounds great. So let's take a look.
Number 1. The name Canada comes from the St. Lawrence Iroquoian word Kanata, which means village or settlement.
This is actually something I remember from a different video I did. Another random piece of information. It's Kanata, right? Canada comes from Kanata?
It comes from the St. Lawrence Iroquoian word Kanata, which
Iroquoian word. Yeah, I only remember this because it sounds like katana. Like the Japanese sword used for fighting samurai. But it's not katana, it's kanata. And it was the word for Canada. Don't ask. Okay, that's how I remember it. Get off my back. That's how I remember it.
which means village or settlement. This turned out to be somewhat of an understatement because... pause for emphasis. Number 2.
Okay.
One of the first things you should realize about Canada is that it's huge. It's the second largest country by total area and the fourth largest by land area, covering 9.98 million square kilometers.
Oh my god. Wait, what is a kilometer? Oh boy, what is a kilometer? What is that? I've heard of a kilometer. I have no internal mental reference for how big a kilometer is. So, 10 million kilometers, it sounds big. That's like, are there like 2 kilometers in a mile, something around that? Or it's like 5 million square miles. I think a lot of Americans don't realize how freaking massive Canada is. For 2 reasons. That growing up in America, this sounds weird, we don't really look at the map of Canada all that much. Now you're saying, but Tyler, when you pull up a map of North America, even if you're looking at the United States, you can plainly see Canada right above it. Well, let me tell you, when you don't talk about it, when you don't discuss it, like how we don't really talk about Canada in our education, you don't even really notice like Canada and Mexico, and we're just focused on the United States. There was a time where I couldn't have even told you what Canada even looked like. The country, what the shape even was. I know that sounds strange, but I think a lot of Americans have that experience. And anyway, most Americans can't name the provinces. It's kind of wild. So, yeah. And also, number 2, on the map, I'm not sure if Canada is to scale like a typical school book map of the world. I don't think it's to scale very well. There's a website where you can see the world actually to scale, and I think Canada is a lot bigger than even the map gives it credit for.
Number 3. If you are somehow struggling to grasp the sheer enormity of Canada, you should know that Canada spans across not 1, not 2, not even 3, 4, or 5, but 6 time zones.
My
Number
God.
4. Canada also has the...
How many time zones do we have here? I feel like America is, we're pretty wide. We're pretty thick. We must have like 4 or 5 time zones. I'm not exactly sure. Could we have 6? 6 sounds like a lot.
World's largest coastline at 202,080 kilometers. That's
Oh.
almost 4 times longer than the coastline of the second-placed country, Indonesia, which has a coastline measuring a measly 54,716 kilometers.
Yeah, Canadian coastline is not something I think about. So a lot more, well, I was going to say a lot more Canadians live by the coast than I thought. But if you think about it even deeper for a second, a lot of the Canadian coast is very, very, like, not habited by many people, right? Like, technically, the coast of Canada goes way up north, like, where it's so cold and difficult to live. It has a lot of coast, but not a lot of people live by it, I think.
Get it together, Indonesia. Nah, just kidding. Size doesn't matter. I've heard. Number 5.
What?
Canada is home
Huh?
to the world's northernmost permanently inhabited place, the aggressively named Alert, found in the territory of Nunavut. The temperature
Alert. I did a video a long time ago trying to learn about the coldest place in Canada. I feel like it was something called Iqaluit or Iqaluit. Maybe that's not correct. Maybe this place, Alert, which I've never heard of, is this the most northern, coldest residence in Canada?
inhabited place, the
It's inhabited.
aggressively named Alert, found in the territory of Nunavut. The temperature in Alert only rises above freezing in the summertime, descending in the winter to a truly horrifying average temperature of around minus 40 degrees.
That's outrage. I mean, that's outrageous. I don't know my Celsius very well. Even I know this is outrageous. Like, wouldn't your bodily fluids, I don't know why I said it like that, your blood freeze at this temperature?
As such, the population of Alert is quite understandably a tiny, probably constantly shivering 62 people.
62?
Number 6.
Oh my.
Canada has the longest binational land border, which it shares with the United States, who
Ah.
understand love a good border. It measures
Yes.
in at 8,891 kilometers long, much of which is made up of the border between Canada and the American state of Alaska.
Oh, true. Alaska. Sometimes even us Americans forget about old Alaska up there, doing what it does. Yeah, even though this is the border with Canada and us, America, I think like a lot of Americans who don't think about it very much, like it's a freaking massive border. It's the biggest. Did they say it's the biggest border between two countries? That's pretty cool.
Number 7. Despite Canada being absolutely chuffing massive, the vast majority of Canadians live within a couple hundred kilometers of this border. Probably due to the fact that anywhere further
Right.
north than this is genital shrinkingly cold.
This is something I don't know if most Americans know this, but I've heard a huge portion of the Canadian population lives as south as possible by the border just because it's not as cold. Is that basically what it boils down to? It's not as cold. And you have some big cities like Toronto that are very south, right?
Number 8. The capital city of Canada is Ottawa, home to a population
Ottawa.
of around 934,000 people. Despite being the capital, Ottawa is not the largest Canadian city and is in fact the 5th. Come on, Ottawa.
I mean, that makes sense. It's not like in America, it's not like Washington, D.C., our capital, is the biggest city. It's not by far. So this isn't that crazy to me.
But get it together. Number 9. The name Ottawa comes from the Anishinaabe word meaning trade or exchange and is rather disappointingly nothing to do with otters. Oh man, I love otters. What am I going to do with this picture of otters now? Oh, let's look at this for a sec.
Wow.
Okay, let's move on.
Yeah.
Number 10. The largest city in Canada is actually Toronto, home
Right.
of 2,731,571 people.
Oh my dear God. Almost 3 million people. This could be its own state. Like in the United States, this could be its own state. It'd be a small one. It'd be like Rhode Island or something. But 3 million people in one city? Oh my God. I remember back in the day thinking, I didn't know if Toronto was a city or a province, or and maybe because it's so freaking massive, maybe that's not that crazy to think.
Toronto is also the birthplace of rapper Drake. Are these facts
Oh.
related? You decide.
Okay, cool.
Number 11. Toronto actually used to be called York. God, first New York, now this? What is it
York.
with North Americans always stealing our place names?
York.
Number 12.
Okay.
Canada is officially bilingual, with both English and French having equal status at the federal level across Canada.
Now, most Americans are familiar with the term French Canadian. We know there is French spoken in Canada. How that works, where it is, most of us have no idea. I know it's like mostly in Quebec. He said technically there are two national languages. So they're both considered national languages. Okay, it's like in America, Spanish is spoken a fair amount, a decent amount, depending on where you live. But it's not considered like a national language or anything.
Bilingual, with both English and French having equal status at the federal level across Canada, as well as all over people's tongues. English is the mother tongue of approximately 60% of the people, whereas Le Français is the mother tongue of around 20% of the population.
What's the other 20%? 60% English. Not as much as I thought. Only 60% of Canadians speak English? Really? That's getting close to 50%. That's getting close to half. 60% speak English? 20% are French. What's the other 20?
I've said tongues too many times now. Tongue. Ugh. Number 13.
What? Did they get that wrong? The stat? 60% English, 20% French, 20% what? Did they get that wrong?
Before the arrival of European colonizers in the early 16th century, Canada had been inhabited by Indigenous people for thousands of years.
Right.
These people are generally split into three groups: First Nations, Inuit, and Métis.
Oh, this is good. This is good for me to know, because I've heard these terms before. I know that there are Indigenous Canadians, just like we have Native Americans in America, the original inhabitants. I've heard all these words, Inuit, First Nations. I didn't know if they were different things or synonyms, or so this is good.
These people are generally split into three groups: First Nations, Inuit, and Métis.
Okay.
And together, they spoke over 60 different languages from 10 separate language families.
Wow.
And this was way, way, way before Google Translate, remember? So life must have been incredibly difficult. You'd
Yeah.
be asking someone for soup and accidentally asking to rot with their aunt or something. Number 14.
Okay.
The First Nations are Canadians from Indigenous groups south of the Arctic Circle. In fact, there are 634 recognised First Nations communities across Canada.
Wow.
Number 15. Heading north, we find the Inuit people, who are spread across several countries in the Arctic Circle. As agriculture was never really an option in the freezing climates of the Inuits' home, unless they were farming for ice, Inuit culture is very heavily centred around a proud hunting tradition. Hardcore.
Okay. Okay.
Number 16. The Métis are Canadians of mixed Indigenous and European heritage. Actually, the word
Interesting. Canadian history is very interesting. Their symbol is like an infinity sign. Or is the infinity sign based off their symbol?
Métis simply means mixed. These mixed communities tended to marry among themselves, and they probably held a hell of a mash too, eventually developing a distinct cultural identity of their own.
Wow.
Good for them.
Cool.
Number 17. The Nunavut territory in northern Canada was only created in 1999. But
What? I've heard of this place. This is a territory. Nunavut. This was only made 25 years ago? What was it before that? Wait, what was it before that?
back when Prince was partying. And prior to that, it was included entirely in the Northwestern Territories.
Oh!
This was done to give the native Inuit population more autonomy over their affairs.
Wow, Canada literally changed an entire big region of Canada, the whole country, just for this reason. Wow, only 25 years ago. Such a massive change. I mean, probably not affecting that many average Canadians, but if you're part of these tribes or groups, this is probably a big win for you, I imagine.
Number 18. Just so you know, the most recently created Canadian province or territory, which is Nunavut, remember, accounts for over a fifth of the nation's entire land area,
Yeah.
making it about 210 times the size of Canada's smallest province or territory, Prince Edward's Island.
Yeah, this part of Canada, so many of us Americans just say like, what what's going on in this part of Canada? What is this? And I'm starting to think not a lot of people actually live here. But this is why Canada has so much coast, right? Because of this area.
If Nunavut was its own country, it would be the 15th largest country on the planet. Once again,
Wow.
Canada is very, very big. They just don't flaunt it very often. Probably out of politeness or something. Number 19. The first Prime Minister of Canada was John A. Macdonald, who served as the nation's leader twice. First between 1867 and 1873, and then again between 1878 and 1891.
Man, sometimes I forget prime ministers. This was like the first prime minister, John A. Macdonald. It's like our George Washington. Well, no Americans know about this guy. I'm sorry. Like, if you asked Americans, who's the first Canadian prime minister? We all know the first American president, and maybe Canadians know this, the first prime minister, John A. Macdonald. I always forget how long prime ministers can serve for. He was in for 6 years, then another 3, 9 years. Wow.
He's remembered fondly for having a farm. Oh no, sorry, that's the other MacDonald. He is remembered fondly for helping form modern-day Canada, and remembered less fondly for his party taking bribes from railway companies and his insistence that French-speaking resistance leader Louis Riel be executed. Don't
What?
mess with MacDonald's farm.
What?
Number 20. The current Prime Minister of Canada is Justin Trudeau. Oh, what a dreamboat. Who is the eldest son of former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, making him the first Canadian Prime Minister to be related to a former holder of the post.
His dad was prime minister. That's pretty amazing. Although, here in America, we've had presidents that are father and son, George Bush. Yeah.
In case you're thinking that's false, it's actually Trudeau. Okay, sorry. Number 21. Justin Trudeau is also the first president who was actually born in the capital of Ottawa. The more you know.
Oh, okay.
Number 22. As far as we know, Justin Trudeau is the only Canadian Prime Minister to have a tattoo, which depicts the Earth surrounded by a Hyder raven.
Oh, a tattoo. Edgy. Very edgy. Very hip. That's the random facts I come here for. Trudeau has the only prime minister to have had a tattoo. A man of the people.
The more I find out about him, the dreamier he gets. Number 23. Canada only became completely independent in 1982, with the passing of the Constitution Act. Prior to that, the British Parliament retained the power to amend Canada's constitution at the request of the Parliament of Canada.
I swear maybe I've heard this before, but I still can't believe this. Canada was technically, I don't know, independent, you could say, in 1982? Or what are we saying happened?
Completely independent in 1982.
Canada became completely independent in 1982. Although I know Canada Day started long before that, and like Queen Victoria gave Canada its independence a long time before this. But Canada became technically totally independent only about 40 years ago. That's pretty unbelievable. Great Britain could actually amend the Canadian Constitution up till 40 years ago. That's pretty shocking.
That a lot back then. Number 24. Despite being a sovereign nation, Canada's head of state is Queen Elizabeth II, who, as you may or may not know, lives primarily in England.
Rest in peace. So what do we call them? Because now it's King Charles.
State is Queen Elizabeth II. Number 24. Despite being a sovereign nation, Canada's head of state is...
Head of state. Head of state. Okay. I don't know these Canadian-British terms.
Queen Elizabeth II, who, as you may or may not know, lives primarily in England. Love you, your Madge. Her position as Yas Queen is represented in Canada by Governor General, a position currently held by David Johnston.
Huh.
Number 25. As mentioned previously, Canada is officially bilingual at the federal level, and the heart of French-speaking Canada is found in the province of Quebec.
Right.
The people of Quebec have a strong identity of their own, so much so that there has been 2 separate votes on making Quebec an independent country.
That's crazy. Yeah, Quebec has voted to be independent, to be its own country. Twice! I mean, that must mean at these points in time, when this happened, Quebec really, really, really was seriously considering it. I mean, it was a vote for it. It could have happened. I think it almost did happen, right?
The second of these was agonisingly close. With over 5 million votes cast, those campaigning to remain part of Canada won with a ridiculously slim majority of 50.56% of the vote.
That's insane. How different would Canada look today? It'd be strange. It'd be like a country within the country. Is there any other country in the world that surrounds another country? Because that's what Quebec would be. It'd be nestled in Canada, but it'd be its own country. Interesting. Not impossible, I guess, and less than 0.5% away from happening.
Oh boy, this comment section's going to be fun, isn't it? Number 26. The name Quebec comes from the Algonquin word Quebec, which means where the river narrows. This
Oh.
refers to the narrowing of the St. Lawrence River, and no, that's not my St. Lawrence. Lovely Jen. Oh, Jen. Oh, she narrows for no man. Number 27.
Wow.
Montreal, the largest city in Quebec, is the second biggest city in the world after Paris, with a French-speaking population. That's something an incorrect person would say. This often cited
Oh, not the second biggest city in the world, period. Second biggest French city is not in France, it's in Canada. Yeah, that's strange to think about.
Montreal factoid hasn't been true for a while, as Montreal have been overtaken by two French-speaking cities in Africa, pushing Montreal into fourth place. Faites-le ensemble, Montreal.
Huh.
Number 28.
There's a lot of random French-speaking places, apparently.
Of Canada's population of over 35 million people, just over 7 million are native French speakers. C'est bon.
Wow.
Fellas. Number 29. Montreal is a very funny place. I'm even laughing just saying it, because it's the home of the Just for Laughs Festival, which is the largest international comedy festival in the world. And no, I haven't been invited.
The largest comedy festival is in Montreal? Is that what he said? French-speaking Canada has the biggest comedy festival? That might be the most random fact of the day.
The official Just for Laughs mascot is named Victor, who looks like some kind of evil Mike Wazowski.
Wow.
Number 30. Though both Canada and the United States both celebrate Thanksgiving, Canada holds theirs a few weeks earlier than the Americans on the second Monday in October.
That is so funny. I forget about that too. I've heard this before. Most Americans have no idea about this. I learned about Canadian Thanksgiving quite a while ago, and that's what I call it, Canadian Thanksgiving. What do you call it? American Thanksgiving? Maybe, I guess that would make sense. Thanksgiving is on different dates, and I almost want to say Thanksgiving was in Canada first. Is that true?
This is all very confusing for those of us who don't celebrate Thanksgiving, although not quite as confusing as to why we don't. I mean, I'm thankful for stuff too. And I like turkey, sometimes, if it's moist. Ugh, moist. Number 30.
Okay. How much do we... There's 101 facts. I guess we'll go till 33, 1/3 of the way.
31. Roughly 40% of Canada's total landmass is covered in forest. Tremendous.
40%. Wow. 40% of Canada is forest? And so much of it is forest. So much of it is like icy, desolate ice where no one wants to live. So Canada is so massive, but so much of it is like not habitable.
Oh, I hate myself. Number 32. Though possibly the most famous lake monster resides in a Scottish loch, Canada has its own famous sea serpent, known as Ogopogo. Supposedly living in Okanagan Lake, British Columbia, Ogopogo is apparently
Ogopogo? Have you heard about Ogopogo?
between 15 meters and 25 meters long.
Never heard of it. Never heard of it.
Halifax, the capital of the province of Nova Scotia, is closer to Dublin, Ireland than it is to Victoria, British Columbia. My God.
Closer to Ireland than another part of Canada.
Say it with me, Canada is big. Number 30.
Okay. Okay. These are getting increasingly more random. Very fun, though. Very interesting. I feel like I'm getting quite the education. But I think I'm going to stop here for now. This is quite long. 101 facts. I'll probably pick this up in another video, part 2, where I will continue learning these Canadian facts. But for part 1, this was awesome. Holy cow. I feel like I'm back in school, getting all this knowledge beamed into my head. And I'm enjoying it. So anyway, if you've enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on any of these Canadian facts. And if you're interested in part 2 of this, or just more videos like this, me reacting to Canada, learning about Canadian culture, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.